Hello, my darlings. How are you this evening? I hope your day was exceptionally good. Did you drink your water today? I hope you did. I had a little this morning, but I promise to have more later. I'm having tea at the moment. Might be a good idea to get something of your own. If you have not eaten today, I hope that at the conclusion of these stories that you will go and get something. I have also eaten, if you are curious. Grab a blanket. I've got mine. Find somewhere cozy to sit. And we shall begin. Tonight's story is Felicia and the Pot of Pinks. Once upon a time, there was a poor labourer who, feeling that he had not much longer to live, wished to divide his possessions between his son and daughter, whom he loved dearly. So he called them to him and said, "Your mother brought me as her dowry 2 stools and a straw bed. I have, besides a hen, a pot of pinks and a silver ring, which were given me by a noble lady who once lodged in my poor cottage. When she went away, she said to me, 'Be careful of my gifts, good man. See that you do not lose the ring or forget to water the pinks. As for your daughter, I promise you that she shall be more beautiful than anyone you ever saw in your life. Call her Felicia, and when she grows up, give her the ring and the pot of pinks to console her for her poverty. Take them both then, my dear child,' he added, 'and your brother shall have everything else.' The 2 children seemed quite contented, and when their father died, they wept for him, and divided his possessions as he had told them. Felicia believed that her brother loved her, but when she sat down upon one of the stools, he said angrily, 'Keep your pot of pinks and your ring, but let my things alone. I like order in my house.' Felicia, who was very gentle, said nothing, but stood up crying quietly, while Bruno, for that was her brother's name, sat comfortably by the fire. Oh dear, is this why we don't talk about Bruno? Presently, when supper time came, Bruno had a delicious egg, and he threw the shell to Felicia, saying, 'There, that is all I can give you. If you don't like it, go out and catch frogs. There are plenty of them in the marsh close by.' Felicia did not answer, but she cried more bitterly than ever, and went away to her own little room. She found it filled with the sweet scent of the pinks, and, going up to them, she said sadly, 'Beautiful pinks, you are so sweet and so pretty. You are the only comfort I have left. Be very sure that I will take care of you and water you well, and never allow any cruel hand to tear you from your stems.' And she leant over them. She noticed that they were very dry. So, taking her pitcher, she ran off in the clear moonlight to the fountain, which was at some distance. When she reached it, she sat down upon the brink to rest. But she had hardly done so when she saw a stately lady coming towards her, surrounded by numbers of attendants. 6 maids of honor carried her train, and she leaned upon the arm of another. When they came near the fountain, a canopy was spread for her, under which was placed a sofa of cloth and gold, and presently a dainty supper was served, upon a table covered with dishes of gold and crystal, while the wind in the trees and the falling water of the fountain murmured the softest music. Felicia was hidden in the shade, too much astonished by all she saw to venture to move. But in a few moments the queen said, "I fancy I see a shepherdess near that tree. Bid her come hither." So Felicia came forward and saluted the queen timidly, but with so much grace that all were surprised. "What are you doing here, my pretty child?" asked the queen. "Are you not afraid of robbers?" "Ah, madam," said Felicia, "a poor shepherdess who has nothing to lose does not fear robbers." "You are not very rich, then?" said the queen, smiling. "I am so poor," answered Felicia, "that a pot of pinks and a silver ring are my only possessions in the world." "But you have a heart," said the queen. "What should you say if anybody wanted to steal that?" "I do not know what it is like to lose one's heart, madam," she replied, "but I have always heard that without a heart one cannot live, and if it is broken one must die, and in spite of my poverty I should be sorry not to live." "You are quite right to take care of your heart, pretty one," said the queen. "But tell me, have you supped?" "No, madam," answered Felicia. "My brother ate all the supper there was." Then the queen ordered that a place should be made for her at the table, and herself loaded Felicia's plate with good things, but she was too much astonished to be hungry. "I want to know what you were doing at the fountain so late," said the queen presently. "I came to fetch a pitcher of water for my pinks, madam," she answered, stooping to pick up the pitcher which stood beside her. But when she showed it to the queen, she was amazed to see that it had turned to gold, all sparkling with great diamonds, and the water, of which it was full, was more fragrant than the sweetest roses. She was afraid to take it until the queen said, "It is yours, Felicia. Go and water your pinks with it, and let it remind you that the Queen of the Woods is your friend." The shepherdess threw herself at the queen's feet and thanked her humbly for her gracious words. "Ah, madam," she cried, "if I might beg you to stay here a moment, I would run and fetch my pot of pinks for you. They could not fall into better hands." "Go, Felicia," said the queen, stroking her cheek softly. "I will wait here till you come back." So Felicia took up her pitcher and ran to her little room. But while she had been away, Bruno had gone in and taken the pot of pinks, leaving a great cabbage in its place. When she saw the unlucky cabbage, Felicia was much distressed and did not know what to do. But at last she ran back to the fountain and, kneeling before the queen, said, "Madam, Bruno has stolen my pot of pinks, so I have nothing but my silver ring, but I beg you to accept it as proof of my gratitude." "But if I take your ring, my pretty shepherdess," said the queen, "you will have nothing left, and what will you do then?" "Ah, madam," she answered simply, "if I have your friendship, I shall do very well." So the queen took the ring and put it on her finger, and mounted her chariot, which was made of coral studded with emeralds, and drawn by 6 milk-white horses. And Felicia looked after her until the winding of the forest path hid her from sight, and then she went back to her cottage, thinking all the wonderful things that had happened. Methinks she has met a fairy, don't you, darlings? The first thing she did when she reached her room was to throw the cabbage out of the window. But she was very much surprised to hear an odd little voice cry out, "Oh, I am half killed!" and could not tell from where it came, because cabbages do not generally speak. As soon as it was light, Felicia, who was very unhappy about her pot of pinks, went out to look for it, and the first thing she found was the unfortunate cabbage. She gave it a push with her foot, saying, "What are you doing here, and how dared you put yourself in the place of my pot of pinks?" "If I haven't been carried," replied the cabbage, "you may be very sure that I shouldn't have thought of going there." It made her shiver with fright to hear the cabbage talk, but he went on. "If you will be good enough to plant me by my comrades again, I can tell you where your pinks are at this moment." "Hidden in Bruno's bed." Felicia was in despair when she heard this, not knowing how she was to get them back. But she replanted the cabbage very kindly in his old place, and as she finished doing it, she saw Bruno's hen, and said, catching hold of it, "Come here, horrid little creature. You shall suffer for all the unkind things my brother has done to me."
"Ah, shepherdess," said the hen, "don't kill me. I'm rather a gossip, and I can tell you some surprising things that you will like to hear. Don't imagine that you are the daughter of the poor labourer who brought you up. Your mother was a queen who had 6 girls already, and the king threatened that unless she had a son who could inherit his kingdom, she should have her head cut off. So when the queen had another little daughter, she was quite frightened, and agreed with her sister, who was a fairy, to exchange her for the fairy's little son. Now the queen had been shut up in a great tower by the king's orders, and when a great many days went by, and still she heard nothing from the fairy, she made her escape from the window by means of a rope ladder, taking her little baby with her. After wandering about until she was half dead with cold and fatigue, she reached this cottage. I was a labourer's wife, and was a good nurse, and the queen gave you into my charge, and told me all her misfortunes, and then died before she had time to say what was to become of you. As I never in all my life could keep a secret, I could not help telling this strange tale to my neighbours, and one day a beautiful lady came here, and I told it to her also. When I had finished, she touched me with a wand she held in her hand, and instantly I became a hen, and there was an end of my talking. I was very sad, and my husband, who was out when it happened, never knew what had become of me. After seeking me everywhere, he believed that I must have been drowned or eaten up by wild beasts in the forest. That same lady came here once more and commanded that you should be called Felicia, and left the ring and the pot of pinks to be given to you. And while she was in the house, 25 of the king's guards came to search for you, doubtless meaning to kill you. But she muttered a few words, and immediately they all turned into cabbages. It was one of them whom you threw out the window yesterday. Well, I didn't know how it was that he could speak. I have never heard either of them say a word before, nor have I been able to do it myself until now."
The princess was greatly astonished at the hen's story, and said kindly, "I am truly sorry for you, my poor nurse. I wish it was in my power to restore you to your real form. But we must not despair. It seems to me, after what you have just told me, that something must be going to happen soon. Just now, however, I must go and look for my pinks, which I love better than anything in the world." Bruno had gone out into the forest, never thinking that Felicia would search in his room for the pinks, and she was delighted by his unexpected absence, and thought to get them back without further trouble. But as soon as she entered the room, she saw a terrible army of rats who were guarding the straw bed, and when she attempted to approach it, they sprang at her, biting and scratching furiously. Quite terrified, she drew back, crying out, "Oh, my dear Pinks, how can you stay here in such bad company?" Then she suddenly bethought herself of the pitcher of water, and, hoping it might have some magic power, she ran to fetch it, and sprinkled a few drops over the fierce-looking swarm of rats. In a moment, not a tail or a whisker was to be seen. Each one had made for his hole as fast as his legs could carry him, so that the princess could safely take her pot of pinks. She found them nearly dying for want of water, and hastily poured all that was left in the pitcher upon them. As she bent over them, enjoying their delicious scent, a soft voice that seemed to rustle among the leaves said, "Lovely Felicia, the day has come at last when I may have the happiness of telling you how even the flowers love you and rejoice in your beauty." The princess, quite overcome by the strangeness of hearing a cabbage, a hen, and a pink speak, and by the terrible sight of an army of rats, suddenly became very pale and fainted away. At that moment, in came Bruno. Working hard in the heat had not improved his temper, and when he saw that Felicia had succeeded in finding her pinks, he was so angry that he dragged her out into the garden and shut the door upon her. The fresh air soon made her open her pretty eyes, and there before her stood the Queen of the Woods, looking as charming as ever. "You have a bad brother," she said. "I saw how cruelly he turned you out. Shall I punish him for it?" "Ah, no, madam," she said. "I am not angry with him." "But supposing he was not your brother? After all, what would you say then?" asked the Queen. "Oh, but I think he must be," said Felicia. "What?" said the Queen. "Have you not heard that you are a princess?" "I was told so a little while ago, madam, but how could I believe it without a single proof?" "Ah, dear child," said the Queen, "the way you speak assures me that, in spite of your humble upbringing, you are indeed a real princess, and I can save you from being treated in such a way again." She was interrupted at this moment by the arrival of a very handsome young man. He wore a coat of green velvet, fastened with emerald clasps, and had a crown of pinks on his head. He knelt upon one knee and kissed the Queen's hand. "Ah," she cried, "my Pink, my dear son, what happiness to see you restored to your natural shape by Felicia's aid." And she embraced him joyfully. Then, turning to Felicia, she said, "Charming princess, I know all the hen told you, but you cannot have heard that the Zephyrs, to whom was entrusted the task of carrying my son to the tower where the Queen, your mother, so anxiously waited for him, left him instead in a garden of flowers, while they flew off to tell your mother. Whereupon a fairy with whom I had quarrelled changed him into a pink, and I could do nothing to prevent it. You may imagine how angry I was, and how I tried to find some means of undoing the mischief she had done. But there was no help for it. I could only bring Prince Pink to the place where you were being brought up, hoping that when you grew up he might love you, and by your care be restored to his natural form. And you see, everything has come right, as I hoped it would. Your giving me the silver ring was a sign that the power of the charm was nearly over, and my enemy's last chance was to frighten you with her army of rats. that she did not succeed in doing. So now, my dear Felicia, if you will be married to my son, with this silver ring your future happiness is certain. Do you think him handsome and amiable enough to be willing to marry him?" "Madam," replied Felicia, blushing, "you overwhelm me with your kindness. I know that you are my mother's sister, and that by your art you turned the soldiers who were sent to kill me into cabbages, and my nurse into a hen, and that you do me only too much honour in proposing that I shall marry your son. How can I explain to you the cause of my hesitation? I feel, for the first time in my life, how happy it would make me to be beloved. Can you indeed give me the prince's heart?" "It is yours already, lovely princess," he cried, taking her hand in his. "But for the horrible enchantment which kept me silent, I should have told you long ago how dearly I love you." This made the princess very happy, and the queen, who could not bear to see her dressed like a poor shepherdess, touched her with her wand, saying, "I wish you to be attired as befits your rank and beauty." And immediately the princess's cotton dress became a magnificent robe of silver brocade embroidered with carbuncles, and her soft dark hair was encircled by a crown of diamonds, from which floated a clear white veil. With her bright eyes and the charming colour in her cheeks, she was altogether such a dazzling sight that the prince could hardly bear it. "How pretty you are, Felicia," he cried. "Don't keep me in suspense, I entreat you. Say that you will marry me." "Ah," said the queen, smiling, "I think she will not refuse now." Just then, Bruno, who was going back to his work, came out of the cottage and thought he must be dreaming when he saw Felicia, but she called him very kindly and begged the queen to take pity on him. "What?" she said, "when he was so unkind to you?" "Ah, madam," said the princess, "I am so happy that I should like everybody else to be happy too." The queen kissed her and said, "Well, to please you, let me see what I can do for this cross Bruno." And with a wave of her wand, she turned the poor little cottage into a splendid palace, full of treasures. Only the 2 stools and the straw bed remained just as they were, to remind him of his former poverty. Then the queen touched Bruno himself, and made him gentle and polite and grateful, and he thanked her and the princess 1,000 times. Lastly, the queen restored the hen and the cabbages to their natural forms, and left them all very contented. The prince and princess were married as soon as possible, with great splendor, and lived happily ever after. What do you think about that, my dears? I am quite glad that the fairy actually turned him into a more genteel sort of man. Would have been a little bit less satisfactory, I think, if she had left him as is. But I would be delighted to know your thoughts, of course. Now, on to something else, I think. Are you still comfortable? I sincerely hope so. Perhaps you have taken the time to grab yourself a glass of water. And we shall continue with the water lily, the gold spinners. Once upon a time, in a large forest, there lived an old woman and 3 maidens. They were all 3 beautiful, but the youngest was the fairest. Their hut was quite hidden by trees, and none saw their beauty but the sun by day, the moon by night, and the eyes of the stars. The old woman kept the girls hard at work from morning till night, spinning gold flax into yarn, and when one distaff was empty, another was given them, so they had no rest. The thread had to be fine and even, and when done, was locked up in a secret chamber by the old woman, who, twice or thrice every summer, went a journey. Before she went, she gave out work for each day of her absence, and always returned in the night, so that the girls never saw what she brought back with her. Neither would she tell them whence the gold flax came, nor what it was to be used for. Now, when the time came round for the old woman to set out on one of these journeys, she gave each maiden work for 6 days, with her usual warning.
Children, don't let your eyes wander, and on no account speak to a man, for if you do, your thread will lose its brightness, and misfortunes of all kinds will follow.
They laughed at this oft-repeated caution, saying to each other, "How can our gold thread lose its brightness, and have we any chance of speaking to a man?" On the 3rd day after the old woman's departure, a young prince, hunting in the forest, got separated from his companions and completely lost. Weary of seeking his way, he flung himself down under a tree, leaving his horse to browse at will and fall asleep. The sun had set when he awoke, and began once more to try and find his way out of the forest. At last he perceived a narrow footpath, which he eagerly followed, and found that it led him to a small hut. The maidens, who were sitting at the door of their hut for coolness, saw him approaching, and the 2 elders were much alarmed, for they remembered the old woman's warning. But the youngest said, "Never before have I seen anyone like him. Let me have one look." They entreated her to come in, but seeing that she would not, left her, and the prince, coming up, courteously greeted the maiden, and told her he had lost his way in the forest, and was both hungry and weary. She set food before him, and was so delighted with his conversation that she forgot the old woman's caution, and lingered for hours. In the meantime, the prince's companions sought him far and wide, but to no purpose. So they sent 2 messengers to tell the sad news to the king, who immediately ordered a regiment of cavalry and one of infantry to go and look for him. After 3 days' search, they found the hut. The prince was still sitting by the door, and had been so happy in the maiden's company that the time had seemed like a single hour. Before leaving, he promised to return and fetch her to his father's court, where he would make her his bride. When he had gone, she sat down to her wheel to make up for lost time, but was dismayed to find that her thread had lost all its brightness. Her heart beat fast, and she wept bitterly, for she remembered the old woman's warning, and knew not what misfortune might now befall her. The old woman returned in the night, and knew by the tarnished thread what had happened in her absence. She was furiously angry, and told the maiden that she had brought down misery both on herself and on the prince. The maiden could not rest for thinking of this. At last she could bear it no longer, and resolved to seek help from the prince. As a child, she had learned to understand the speech of birds, and this was now of great use to her, for, seeing a raven pluming itself on the pine bough, she cried softly to it, "Dear bird, cleverest of all birds, as well as swiftest of wing, will thou help me?"
Nevermore. How can I help thee?
asked the raven. She answered, "Fly away until thou comest to a splendid town where stands a king's palace. Seek out the king's son and tell him that a great misfortune has befallen me." Then she told the raven how her thread had lost its brightness, how terribly angry the old woman was, and how she feared some great disaster. The raven promised faithfully to do her bidding, and, spreading its wings, flew away. The maiden now went home and worked hard all day at winding up the yarn her elder sisters had spun, for the old woman would let her spin no longer. Towards evening, she heard the raven's from the pine tree, and eagerly hastened thither to hear the answer. By great good fortune, the raven had found a wind wizard's son in the palace garden, who understood the speech of birds, and to him he had entrusted the message. When the prince heard it, he was very sorrowful, and took counsel with his friends how to free the maiden. Then he said to the wind wizard's son, "Beg the raven to fly quickly back to the maiden, and tell her to be ready on the 9th night, for then I will come and fetch her away." The wind wizard's son did this, and the raven flew so swiftly that it reached the hut that same evening. The maiden thanked the bird heartily and went home, telling no one what she had heard. As the 9th night drew near, she became very unhappy, for she feared lest some terrible mischance should arise and ruin all. On the night, she crept quietly out of the house and waited, trembling, at some little distance from the hut. Presently, she heard the muffled tramp of horses, and soon the armed troop appeared, led by the prince, who had prudently marked all the trees beforehand, in order to know the way. When he saw the maiden, he sprang from his horse, lifted her into the saddle, and then, mounting behind, rode homewards. The moon shone so brightly that they had no difficulty in seeing the marked trees. By and by, the coming dawn loosened the tongues of all the birds, and, had the prince only known what they were saying, or the maiden been listening, they might have been spared much sorrow. But they were thinking only of each other, and when they came out of the forest, the sun was high in the heavens. Next morning, when the youngest girl did not come to her work, the old woman asked where she was. The sisters pretended not to know, but the old woman easily guessed what had happened, and, as she was in reality a wicked witch, determined to punish the fugitives. Accordingly, she collected 9 different kinds of enchanters, nightshade, added some salt, which she first bewitched, and, doing all up in a cloth into a shape of a fluffy ball, sent it after them on the wings of the wind, saying, "Whirlwind, mother of the wind, lend thy aid against her who sinned. Carry with thee this magic ball, cast her from his arms forever, bury her in the rippling river." At midday, the prince and his men came to a deep river, spanned by so narrow a bridge that only one rider could cross at a time. The horse on which the prince and the maiden were riding had just reached the middle when the magic ball flew by. The horse in its fright suddenly reared, and before anyone could stop it, flung the maiden into the swift current below. The prince tried to jump in after her, but his men held him back, and in spite of his struggles, led him home, where for 6 weeks he shut himself up in a secret chamber, and would neither eat nor drink, so great was his grief. At last he became so ill his life was despaired of, and in great alarm the king caused all the wizards of his country to be summoned, but none could cure him. At last, The Wind Wizard's son said to the king, "Send for the old wizard from Finland. He knows more than all the wizards of your kingdom put together." A messenger at once was sent to Finland, and a week later the old wizard himself arrived on the wings of the wind.
"Honored king," said the wizard, "the wind has blown this illness upon your son, and a magic ball has snatched away his beloved. This it is which makes him grieve so constantly. Let the wind blow upon him, that it may blow away his sorrow."
Then the king made his son go out into the wind, and he gradually recovered and told his father all.
"Forget the maiden," said the king, "and take another bride."
But the prince said he could never love another. A year afterwards, he came suddenly upon a bridge where his beloved had met her death. As he recalled the misfortune, he wept bitterly, and would have given all he possessed to have her once more alive. In the midst of his grief, he thought he heard a voice singing, and looked round, but could see no one. Then he heard the voice again, and it said, "Alas, bewitched and all forsaken, 'tis I must lie for ever here. My beloved no thought has taken to free his bride that was so dear." He was so greatly astonished, he sprang from his horse and looked everywhere to see if no one were hiding under the bridge, but no one was there. Then he noticed a yellow water lily floating on the surface of the water, half hidden by its broad leaves. But flowers do not sing, and in great surprise he waited, hoping to hear more. Then again the voice sang, "Alas, bewitched and all forsaken, 'tis I must lie here forever. My beloved no thought has taken to free his bride that was so dear." The prince suddenly remembered the gold spinners and said to himself, "If I ride thither, who knows but they could explain this to me?" He at once rode to the hut and found the two maidens at the fountain. He told them what had befallen their sister the year before, and how he had twice heard a strange song, but yet could see no singer. They said that the yellow water lily could be none other than their sister, who was not dead, but transformed by the magic ball. Before he went to bed, the eldest made a cake of magic herbs, which she gave him to eat. In the night he dreamt that he was living in the forest and could understand all that the birds said to each other. Next morning he told this to the maidens, and they said that the charmed cake had caused it, and advised him to listen well to the birds, and see what they could tell him. And when he had recovered his bride, they begged him to return and deliver them from their wretched bondage. Having promised this, he joyfully returned home, and as he was riding through the forest, he could perfectly understand all the birds said. He heard a thrush say to the magpie,
"How stupid men are! They cannot understand the simplest thing. It is now quite a year since the maiden was transformed into a water lily, and though she sings so sadly that anyone going over the bridge must hear her, yet no one comes to her aid. A former bridegroom rode over it a few days ago and heard her singing, but no wiser than the rest."
"And he's to blame for all her misfortunes," added the magpie. "If he heeds only the words of men, she will remain a flower forever. She was soon delivered, were the matter only laid before the old wizard of Finland." After hearing this, the prince wondered how he could get a message conveyed to Finland. He heard one swallow say to another, "Come, let us fly to Finland. We can build better nests there." "Stop, kind friends," cried the prince. Will ye do something for me?" The birds consented, and he said, "Take 1,000 greetings from me to the Wizard of Finland, and ask him how I may restore the maiden transformed into a flower to her own form." The swallows flew away, and the prince rode on to the bridge. There he waited, hoping to hear the song, but he heard nothing but the rushing of the water, the moaning of the wind, and disappointed rode home. Shortly after, he was sitting in the garden, thinking that the swallows must have forgotten his message, when he saw an eagle flying above him. The bird gradually descended until it perched on a tree close to the prince and said, "The Wizard of Finland greets thee, and bids me say that thou mayest free the maiden thus. Go to the river and smear thyself all over with mud. Then say, 'From a man into a crab,' and thou wilt become a crab. Plunge boldly into the water, swim as close as thou canst to the water lily's roots, and loosen them from the mud and reeds. This done, fasten thy claws into the roots, and rise with them to the surface. Let the water flow all over the flower, and drift with the current, until thou comest to a mountain ash tree on the left bank. There is near it a large stone. Stop there and say, 'From a crab into a man, from a water lily into a maiden,' and ye will both be restored to your own forms." Full of doubt and fear, the prince let some time pass before he was bold enough to attempt to rescue the maiden. Then a crow said to him,
"Why dost thou hesitate? The old wizard has not told thee wrong, neither have the birds deceived thee. Hasten and dry the maiden's tears."
"Nothing worse than death can befall me," thought the prince, "and death is better than endless sorrow." So he mounted his horse and went to the bridge. Again he heard the water lilies lament, and, hesitating no longer, smeared himself all over with mud, and saying, "From a man into a crab," plunged into the water. For one moment the water hissed in his ears, and then all was silent. He swam up to the plant and began to loosen its roots, but so firmly were they fixed in the mud and reeds that this took him a long time. He then grasped them and rose to the surface, letting the water flow over the flower. The current carried them down the stream, but nowhere could he see the mountain ash. At last he saw it, and close by the large stone. Here he stopped and said, "From a crab into a man, from a water lily into a maiden," and to his delight found himself once more a prince, and the maiden was by his side. She was 10 times more beautiful than before, and wore a magnificent pale yellow robe, sparkling with jewels. She thanked him for having freed her from the cruel witch's power, and willingly consented to marry him. But when they came to the bridge, where he had left his horse, it was nowhere to be seen, for, though the prince thought he had been a crab only a few hours, he had in reality been under the water for more than 10 days. While they were wondering how they should reach his father's court, they saw a splendid coach, driven by 6 gaily caparisoned horses, coming along the bank. In this they drove to the palace. The king and queen were at church, weeping for their son, whom they had long mourned for dead. Great was their delight and astonishment when the prince entered, leading the beautiful maiden by the hand. The wedding was at once celebrated, and there was feasting and merrymaking throughout the kingdom for 6 weeks. Some time afterwards, the prince and his bride were sitting in the garden, when a crow said to them,
"Ungrateful creatures! Have ye forgotten the 2 poor maidens who helped ye in your distress? Must they spin gold flax forever? Have no pity on the old witch. The 3 maidens are princesses, whom she stole away when they were children together, with all the silver utensils which she turned into gold flax. Poison were her fittest punishment."
The prince was ashamed of having forgotten his promise, and set out at once, and by great good fortune reached the hut when the old woman was away. The maidens had dreamt that he was coming, and were ready to go with him. But first they made a cake, in which they put poison, and left it on the table where the old woman was likely to see it when she returned. She did see it, and thought it looked so tempting that she greedily ate it up, and at once died. In the secret chamber were found 50 wagon loads of gold flax, and as much more was discovered buried. The hut was razed to the ground, and the prince and his bride and her 2 sisters lived happily ever after. And that is all for this evening, my darlings. Poor princesses. Be sure to drink your water, as I promised to drink mine. Be sure to eat some food, as I shall also be fixing my dinner here very shortly. And when you go to sleep tonight, my dears, I hope your dreams are very sweet, and I will see you on the morrow. Good night.